15th of May, 2185. At 1422 hours Super Earth Standard Time, SEAF Special Operations and Command, the Office of Naval Intelligence, experienced multiple simultaneous failures to query defense satellites stationed around the Meridian wormhole. By 1500 hours, galactic comms were lit up with the reports of simultaneous attacks upon outlying SEAF stations in the Widow's Harbor system. In the hours after, Intel has since conclusively and positively confirmed the presence of a massive Illuminate fleet and, in clear violation of the enemy's recent eradication, numerous planetary scale incursions. A state of extratyrannical emergency has been declared. 3 planets lying within the essential supply line and now invasion corridor into Super Earth, the cradle of humanity, are under siege by the Illuminate Empire: Widow's Harbor, Pilen 5, and New Haven. High Command, believing this fleet's ultimate objective to be the invasion of Super Earth itself, issued major order to countless fleet elements and Helldiver units across the galaxy to immediately and aggressively interdict the Illuminate advance, and to, under no circumstance, offer or provide any quarter to the enemy. May 16th, one such combat unit, the battle carrier SES Wings of Redemption, carrying an entire division of the 317th Special Reconnaissance and Interdiction, departs from the fleet muster at Democracy Space Station over Clarel on the Automaton front, on direct transfer to the Pilen 5 system to rendezvous with the 959th Angels of Death. In spite of the presence of their respective fleet groups and the immense task fleet they are joining, cross-military defense projections indicate that preventing this force from reaching Super Earth is not possible. All 3 planets will fall. The Helldivers' engagement parameters are then simplified to inflict as much damage to the enemy fleet as possible while megacity defenses are bolstered. Ground assault on Super Earth is inevitable. And so, at the end of the 3rd week of May, the battle for Super Earth has finally begun. This docu-series annotates the experience of one of countless Super Earth ship task forces over one of the 3 Vanguard planets. The standing order as of recording is to hold all 3 of Widow's Harbor, Pilen 5, and New Haven, with the harbor already fallen into enemy hands and, at present, the current garrison at Pilen 5 facing innumerable enemies and taller, longer odds. As of current date, there is not a single man, woman, or Helldiver on planet or above in orbit that earnestly believes that a sustained defense of any of the remaining systems is possible, with frantic actions on the part of both sides of the conflict, including suicidal maneuvers, fragging, and even desertion. In the midst of the growing despair on both of the settlers and defenders of Pilen 5, the purpose of this data intro is twofold. 1. Document the brave action of some of the most elite operating units within the larger SEAF body, and 2, and most importantly, educate those exterior to the singular conflict of the strategies and methods which have successfully countered alien action so far on the ground, and the countless more which have failed. But firstly, before numbers, doctrine, logistics, or even weapons can be discussed, an analysis of the terrain and conditions is necessary to achieve a full picture of the conflict and its nature. Pilen 5 is a nearly barren planet-class astronomical body found within the Pilen system of the Altus sector, directly outside of the Terminid front and on the very doorstep of Super Earth, whose dominion it resides under. Having fallen prey to the onslaught that is the Terminid hive species, this planet is, in the past year, no stranger to war. However, perhaps, as is the case with so many sudden and random incursions, nowhere near acquainted so much as to be ready for the onslaught that is an Illuminate battle fleet. Having terrain that is largely considered Martian in classification, it is predominantly a rocky and mountainous, veritable red sandbox where the unbearable heat substantially hinders the heavy covered armor of special military units such as planetary garrisons and now Helldivers on the surface, causing difficulty in sustaining mobility and agility, as well as straining the heat sinks of any energy-based weapons in the Defense Force arsenal to the point of failure. Scythes, sickles, and anything else with battery cells is subject to frequent overheating and a subsequent massive decrease in firing output as a result. Additionally, and worse still, its climate is given to storm often, carrying vast clouds of loose particulate high into the atmosphere, reducing visibility on the ground to virtually nil, which, given the ravenously aggressive and forward nature of the majority of the Illuminate invasion force, massively benefits the attackers in the way of robbing the Helldivers and wider humanity of their single greatest advantage in the Second Galactic War so far: superior volume and accuracy of firepower over range. Pair that with the fact that the Illuminate, uncharacteristically cowardly, are only given to attacking humanity's population centers for the bolstering of their own forces with the converted abominations that are the voteless, and you have a perfect storm where the weather conditions reduce the already poor sightlines and limited geometry of urban environments to a nearly blind melee, guaranteeing that any infantry who steps foot within a HAB zone will be outnumbered, swarmed, and in all likelihood overrun as soon as they are detected. Outside the walls, Helldivers are easy prey in the open to be picked off by any number of air units, one of which is new and far more lethal than the rest, forcing this intelligence report to conclude that there is no environment on the geography of this planet which grants small operating units such as the Helldivers teams any meaningful advantage, and that, in a defense campaign such as this, Super Earth's defense force is wholly incapable of withstanding an attack of this volume from this or any threat. To understand how this conclusion was reached, next we must examine the force gravity of the parties within the conflict, where they are strong and capable or weak and ineffective, and what factors cause these conditions. Firstly, the defenders, and in this case primarily the Helldivers, are the infamous elite drop shock troopers and serve as a branch within the wider SEAF or Super Earth Defense Force body. Helldivers are, admittedly, by nature and primary directive, not effective in a vacuum. But with the consideration that each diver acts as a forward ground observer to an SES super destroyer in low orbit with any number of orbital cannonade, drop module, or fighter complement configuration capable of reducing any known organism, object, or standing structure into glass, they are uniquely qualified to undertake the most volatile, inhospitably conditioned, wholly dangerous operations that any other combat unit would flake under the weight of. And while their strategies and equipment may differ widely, the consistent factors are always that the maximum offering of Helldivers in any squad is 4 bodies within a combat zone at any given time, they are limited to very few reinforcements, and their operational effectiveness is directly related to that of their super destroyer. And without it, they lack the ability to resupply, rearm, or call in any fire support which they heavily rely upon to accomplish strategic objectives. In summary, after the window of coverage in lower orbit dictated by the power consumption required to maintain a low orbital station with the destroyer passes, any Helldiver personnel that remains in action is virtually helpless to any concentrated enemy attack. Their role as shock troopers far and beyond grants an advantage in assaults on enemy worlds and offensive operations. However, with no real way to maintain in any AO for even an hour, self-articulate without any orbital support, or garrison a planet as a long-term defensive body with familiarity with any terrain, they find themselves on the back foot more times than not in defensive conflict. In contrast, our attacker, the Illuminate Empire, has always been the aggressor during the entirety of their participation within the Second Galactic War, forcing humanity and its Helldivers into disadvantage time after time, and with the presence of not a scouting element or task fleet making a probing attack, but a full-scale battle group in orbit over a world with new and previously unencountered units, they are deadlier than ever. Whether it's heavy cannon fodder, persistent artillery, or worse of all, close air support, the new Illuminate battle organisms and weapon systems fill many of the holes found within their initially lacking technological base, and even go so far as to outclass similar offerings within other factions in humanity's war for survival. The undying and restless mob of mind-slaved humans that are the voteless is already well known to veterans of previous Squid campaigns, and while subtle variants in xenobiology existed within these, what none were ready for is the new dramatic development that is what many veterans fortunate enough to survive an orbital drop down on the surface of the new front have taken to calling the Flesh Mob. Numerous, what appear to be roughly a dozen or more, former citizens and patriots of the Super Earth governance slaved and melded together in a raging mass of fuck you, with numerous arms, heavy legs, and enough speed to chase Helldivers down, and the mass required to pound anything in their way flat until they have achieved the objective of doing the very same to any and all threats. The size, great as it is perhaps not nearly enough to portray the sheer durability of these organisms, however. Forget small arms, grenades, autocannon rounds, expendable rockets, laser-guided missiles, radar-guided missiles, and any number of stratagems deployed from orbit or fighter are insufficient to do the job that is taking one of these. In fact, very few pieces of ordnance in the arsenal of a Helldivers capable of taking one in a single blow. If a Helldivers destroyer support is occupied, loading the next bombardment salvo or else rearming Eagle 1, there is literally nothing aside from the heaviest and most dense application of concentrated firepower that will take one down. With plasma weapons and mechanized war machines, ironically, this Michelin Man looking motherfucker is actually possibly the worst thing that they've got walking down there right now. Any number of their mini heads can be destroyed to no effect, legs can be reduced to nothing aside from bare bones, and they still move with the same insistent speed as if they were completely unharmed. Perhaps most whelming of the new adversaries, the least we have to say is about the Overseers with a new infantry-carried shoulder-mounted artillery piece which serves to accurately and constantly pound the position of a target. Most interestingly, they are capable of spotting and engaging targets without personally making visible contact initially, indicating that some form of communication exists between either themselves and their voteless thralls or else other Overseers or Squid combat units. Ground forces quickly discovered that as long as the path was clear, closing the distance is the fastest way to render them virtually helpless and vulnerable to a cosmic shit-kicking whenever it is possible. Finally, and most concerningly, a larger component of the Illuminate's air power has finally revealed itself in the form of the Interloper or Stingray attack craft, a fast, nimble, and heavily armed craft commonly mistaken by newer recruits as bot gunships, which has, with no exaggeration, completely f***ed every single guy we've thrown at it. Like, holy shit, actually. Watch this for a second. This fucking asshole strafes like two dudes coming out of pods. We have slurs for Lunats, okay? But trust me, after this dog shit, we're gonna have like a good 4 or 5 more. Operators that survived relied on speed to be fast enough to maneuver out of the path of a strafing run. However, the equipment required to down them most reliably generally is heavy and unwieldy, forcing the loss of many otherwise capable troopers attempting to even recover the utility necessary to get a shot off on one. Your best bet is to get your hands on a heavy weapon system as fast as possible and to then track where they're heading in the sky and orient your weapon system to the horizon. When they crest, they drop low to reduce speed to deliver ordnance, which is not only where they're most vulnerable, it's the only time that they are, as when in their more mobile flight condition, they can outturn and outpace any guided munitions capable of maintaining a lock in the first place. Of the weapons tested, flak rounds from an autocannon were the most consistent with 2 to 3 shots, but expendable anti-tank dumbfire rockets were useful, granted the experience required to lead one shot on one. And you can forget about the spear, which honestly most of you probably don't even remember that they give us one in the first place. I don't think anyone else carries them. With this disparity in mind, it is clearer why the Illuminates are now so much more effective in this war. But finally, to paint the whole picture, field experience. Both the Special Reconnaissance and Interdiction and Angels of Death are, by nature, most commonly deployed as elite jump infantry, with far more training than the average Helldiver and generally composed of veterans of the Galactic War. Read, both divisions have been fighting since the Creek and are very good at what they do. Here is what our operators in the field have found most effective put together. The number one problem with facing the Illuminate on Pilen 5 and in general is their hordes. The Overseers, as durable as they are, would not be more of a threat than the heavier automaton Devastator, and even with support from their massive war tripods are certainly most vulnerable to accurate fire from a specialized and narrow field of weapons systems. The issue is that by enslaving and weaponizing the general masses of humanity, they have been able to tap a nearly endless source of bodies, specifically ideal to neutralizing threats from those types of systems by requiring divers to instead contend with the more immediate threat of anywhere from 10 to 100 crying, moaning, shambling bioforms that, weak and vulnerable as they are, serve as a most effective screening element, allowing more valuable battle assets to bring their actually threatening weapons to bear. Divers are either caught fighting a horde of dozens of zombies with a marksman rifle built to eliminate single high-value targets, or else equipped with an auto rifle or shotgun capable of contending with those high-volume mobs, while nearly incapable of penetrating the much heavier armored plate of the actual Illuminate force body. In short, Illuminate attack groups are either entirely unequipped and poorly trained utter chaff, or the single most elite warriors that the galaxy has to offer, with some of, if not the very best in war gear, with no in between. As such, very few weapon systems are effective at dealing with both camps, and none do so efficiently. This now is the unique challenge of the Illuminate race that humanity must contend with if it is to survive. All bots are vulnerable to a well-placed shot with a marksman or anti-material rifle. All bugs die easily to flames, but there is not a single implement that works well against the voteless and also against flesh mobs, Overseers, and their tripods and aircraft. More so than other forces, this makes Helldivers work most effectively in groups groups where each member has tailored their armament to cover one aspect of warfare with the enemy, while their brother in arms deals with the other. For every sniper or rocket trooper, there should be a Helldiver with an MG capable of laying down the hate with hundreds of rounds of covering fire to allow the weapons operators to target heavier opponents with greater ease.
How'd you like to taste of freedom?
They fucking hate freedom. Furthermore, stratagems are, as always, key, and finding the right ones is a big deal and a game changer. The cluster bomb is once again one of the single most effective utilities against both camps of the Illuminate, capable of tearing through hordes of voteless and overseers alike with ease, only ineffective against tripods and now flesh mobs, which can easily enough be focused down once the chaff is off the table. On the opposite end, the 500 kilogram bomb will kill flesh mobs every time and fairly consistently smoke a tripod or at least heavily disable it, given that its shield is down before contact. And in spite of their technological advantage over the standard forces of Super Earth and especially the other players in this war, the Illuminates are still particularly vulnerable to some of the most base and rudimentary tools of fighting. The standard machine gun is a design which has now existed for nearly 300 years at this point, yet lays down enough fire to single-handedly tackle infestations of thralls, all the way up to at least damaging the weak points of tripods through sheer volume and armor penetration. The expendable anti-tank one-time use rocket tube is cheap and highly efficient at destroying enemy armor, where targeting the leg joint of a tripod will down it with one shot past the shield, and given that a destroyer can deploy a pod with 2 on an average of every minute from orbit, they're often common enough to use on smaller targets like overseers to completely evaporate them as a threat. And while we're on the subject of overseers, though their weapon of choice is indeed a close combat staff, the standard overseer is actually quite weak in melee, often opting for heavily telegraphed attacks which can be predicted and dodged, and often weak if a specialist is capable of getting in on their inside and dealing damage with any bladed weapon, bayonet, or entrenching tool if necessary. But perhaps the single most damning element to the Illuminate is the concept of high ground. Jump packs already grant a massive advantage in regular environments, but in urban warfare for divisions like the 317th and 959th who heavily rely upon them to navigate the treacherous streets, we have been able to secure firing positions unreachable by the vast majority of squid enemies, allowing friendly units to focus the majority of their damage where they like at their discretion without being forced to contend with annoying screening behavior from boatless. This comes with the added benefit of having a superior vantage point for plotting the most effective utilization of stratagems, as well as being helpful to weapons teams who have taken to deploying recoilless rockets and machine guns from the rooftops and focusing down their specialized targets until a position is clear, and coordinating elaborate and deadly ambushes on the unsuspecting and inferior basic ground troops. In conclusion, if the probing attacks on the wider Super Earth territories and now the full-scale assault on the whole of the Altus sector have proven anything, it is that the Illuminates bleed. They may try to mask their weakness in numbers with inferior and undemocratically sourced abominations of human form, but the fact remains that in spite of their extended lifespans, their extensive training, and extreme technological leaps ahead, the squids cannot sustain the losses that have been inflicted upon them. And eventually, not today, not on Pilen 5, or New Haven, or Widow's Harbor, perhaps not even the next battle or campaign, but in time, the Illuminate Empire will be forced to reconcile with the insurmountable casualty rates inflicted by Super Earth and its one resource which is never in shortage: the free, patriotic, and unfalteringly heroic men and women who stand before them in the precipice of their victory and the end of all that we as a species have to hold dear. That reckoning awaits the Illuminate on Earth. Whether this message gets out before the end of the battle and likely what will come to be known as the fall of Pilen 5, it is paramount to the success of our operation and by the extension, the continuation of our species and its government that any servant of Super Earth and democracy watching this utilizes the information provided here and share any observations or intelligence available to them in the comments down below, and perhaps even leave positive or negative input for the review of the Ministry of Truth. But until then, I will be fighting on Pilen 5 in the space of the Altus sector, and then, eventually, inevitably, Earth itself. And I will see you there.
Come on!